busy, living so busy, living so busy, living sober. I'm so excited. By the way, welcome back if you're here to watch again. And I have a guest that I have not met yet. This is the first time we're meeting. His name is Bob Stark, also known as Robert Stark. And the best thing when he wrote to me, you guys, the first thing he said, I think, was that you were a father and a husband. He's also a veteran. He's been sober for 9 years. He wrote a book. He's born and bred from Alaska. Welcome on the show, Bob.
Woo! Yeah, thank you for having me on.
I'm so glad you're here. I was intrigued when I got your email. For one, thank you for your service. Um, I think our world has changed so much that we forget what you guys that go out there and fight for us and fight for our rights. And today, some people don't realize how important that is, and we just put that by the side for all this other noise. Let's call it noise rather than get into the particulars. But to thank you because you guys went out there and put your lives on the line for us. And I really, really, really appreciate that. So thank you as an American to another an American. Thank you. And so I want to start at the beginning. So you grew up in Alaska.
I did. Yeah, I was born in Caldwell, Idaho,
Okay.
and we moved to Alaska. My mother divorced her husband at the time and moved with my brother and I from Caldwell, Idaho area to Nome, Alaska, which is far north above the Arctic Circle. And we lived up there for my first 8 years, maybe 9 years. And then we moved from there to another part of Alaska, which is called Eagle River, which is a pretty big suburb outside of Anchorage. It's about 13 miles outside of Anchorage. And then we lived there for about 5 years, 6 years. And then we moved from there to Seward, Alaska, which is a coastal community on South Central. And I lived there until I graduated high school. So from about 13 to 17 or 18. And then I went to the military at 17, just after high school, did the military thing, and came back. I always came back to Alaska. So now I own some property on the other side of the Kenai Peninsula from Seward in a little town called Happy Valley. And yeah, we live there, my wife, myself, and our two daughters. We have 20 acres, small, up and coming farm slash garden, kind of right there in between. We're off grid, so we use generator and solar and that deal. And yeah, I plan to be an Alaskan, unless anything changes my whole life. Not just because of the permanent fund dividend, which is a good perk.
But that's amazing. Now I want to. Why did your mom go to Alaska, Nome, Alaska, originally? What drew her there?
Yeah, because I was so young at the time, perhaps this story is incorrect, the one that I've always believed, but I understand that she moved us there because her brother, who is my uncle, was living in Nome. He was stationed there in the National Guard with his two kids at the time. His wife left Alaska. He met her and married her in Korea. She got to Nome and wasn't really feeling the Nome, Alaska. So she left, and my mother moved with us up there, and we lived with my uncle, and she took care of kind of the at home parental duties of the four kids. And he went to work in the National Guard. And so we stayed there until my mother married another man. And then he was in the National Guard. When he got transferred, we moved to Eagle River. So yeah, that's why we went to Nome.
Okay, by the way, the names of the towns just make it sound appealing. Okay, Eagle River. I just think of this beautiful, eagle flying over this river. And then Happy Valley. The only thing I know that's called Happy Valley is Penn State, in outside of Philadelphia, like in between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So, and what part of the service were you in?
I was in the Army.
You were in the Army. And where were you
Yeah.
based?
So I was airborne infantry in the Army. So I jumped out of helicopters and airplanes. And, my job was basically the frontline grunt guy. And I was based, my first duty station was Italy. And then I stayed there for about 6 months before I got deployed to Iraq during the invasion of 2003. And so my unit, we were in Italy, and we were called to parachute into Iraq. And so we parachuted into Iraq, and then we stayed there for just about a year, that first deployment. And then I went from Iraq back to Italy, Italy to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I got stationed with the 101st Airborne Division. And then I went back to Iraq for another deployment, another almost year. You know, they were both about 11 and a half months. So you can't round up. So I guess it's 11 months each one. And yeah, then I did my 4.5, 4 years. And then I got out. And when I was 22, which was in 2006, woo, growing up. And yeah, that's what I did in the military, very vaguely.
And I know you probably can't get into a lot of stuff anyway, probably, but I mean, you probably saw stuff. Now, were you a drinker during those times till you were 22? I mean, so you
Oh
were
yeah.
enlisted at 17. I mean, it's not legal to drink till you're 21, but did you drink anyway?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, my drinking started when I was, I don't know, a little boy, you know, seeing a neighbor dad who's also a baseball coach drinking whiskey, and he always had like these beautiful girlfriends. And then my mom always had some triple sec or some of those liqueurs. And so it started with those little innocent shooters, you know, just trying it, really good flavor with the liqueur, and then that burn of the whiskey and wanting to be like him.
Ah,
And then probably around 11 or 12 is when I started kind of drinking with my older brother a little bit. And then it was really after some transformational things happened in like seventh grade, 12, 13 years old, that we moved from Eagle River to Seward because my mother divorced her husband at the time, was remarrying a guy who was in prison for life there in Seward. And my brother got in trouble and got sentenced to go to that prison. And so all of a sudden we had this like Eagle River suburban family. You know, I was a baseball star, and then boom, like that, my brother committed a crime. I was doing what I thought was right by telling police officers what he told me to try to get him the help that he needed. And they used my recording in court. And so, you know, I'm snitching on my brother. And then my mother divorces the guy and then marries uh, a man who's in life for prison in prison for life without parole. And he was a black man who, I got nothing against that, but his crime was considered a hate crime against white people. And so here's my white mother marrying this black guy who's like the leader of the blacks in prison. And it's like, oh my gosh. And so with the shame of telling on my brother,
ah,
with now we're in Seward, and I'm not playing baseball anymore because they don't have a baseball team. And I'm this like prison family that is not living in a suburb house. Now I'm living in an equal housing opportunity apartment that everybody calls crackside. And so I went from like smoking a little cigarettes, smoking a little weed, to just drinking every day, smoking bud from the time I woke up, chain smoking cigarettes, and, you know, dabbling with other things. But yeah, so that's what I went until 17 on that path. Whereas I'm not going to say I was that kid who woke up every day and had to drink. I just drank. That's just what I did every day. That was my identity. I was the party kid. I would, get you to smoke with me. I was peer pressuring everybody. I was the kid that if it was my kids, I wouldn't let my daughters hang out with me at that age. I was up to no good. And inside there was a heart of gold. There really was, but it was so clouded by shame and fear of letting people know me and embarrassment. And yeah, then I saw that recruiter on the top of the stairs at the school, and I was like, oh my God, I want that honor. I want that pride, and I want to be healthy. And so, yeah, I joined up. My mom signed the release because I was 17, and I went off to basic training. And yeah, when I got to Italy, I remember I hadn't drank, I hadn't done any tobacco, nothing by the time I got over there. And I remember just feeling so good about myself after all the physical training and the mental clarity. And mind you, it was only a few months, but we know what a few months can do to someone.
mhm.
And so when I got to Italy, and I was given a hotel room in an Italian hotel to myself. That 18-year-old partier came out, and I could go on base and I could buy any liquor that I wanted. And so, what started as like, oh, I'm going to buy a couple beers became, I'm going to drink 2 bottles of wine and save the labels because, I'm like a wine aficionado. And yeah, then it was 2 bottles of wine with 240s, and just the escalation happened. And then I went to Iraq, and in Iraq I drank one time while I was there for that
Is it
11 and
is
a half
is
months.
is it hard to drink there? Because isn't it's not legal, is it?
I'm not sure what it's like for other units. I know for me it was black market. Like we had an interpreter smuggle us a bottle of whiskey, and we weren't like on base. We were always out in the cities, and we were living in doing dangerous things. And so none of us at that time were taking substances, which
Right.
I heard of later, people getting more and more into different things, but we were pretty clear and sharp because we had to be. And so yeah, I mean for us it was really hard to get our hands on that and to find the time to want to be drunk or stoned, if you will. And but still, that year gave me that confidence, like I can do this. I got out of there, and right off the bat, boom, first nights, just right back to blackout Bob. And then, that cycle happened again. I got transferred duty stations, getting in trouble in Italy, transferred to Fort Campbell, same cycle. I'm drinking every day and smoking bud while I'm in the military because I'm trying to get kicked out because they're telling us that they were going to stop loss us, which at that time they kept you in past your enlistment date because they were going to send you back.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go back. It's not that I was afraid of dying. I just didn't want to kick down any more people's doors. And it does something to you to point your gun in innocent people's faces time after time after time. And I didn't want to do that anymore. And so, I couldn't get out of going back. They knew that me and some other guys were smoking. They wouldn't give us urinalysis tests. And we went back. And so I still didn't drink. I was living on a base that time, but I was still from the first year. I knew that at any moment I might have to fight, and I don't want to be drunk. So yeah, that was another year of sobriety. I've accumulated years over my span of drinking. And then when I got back and I got out of the military, that's when I'm not going to say I hit it harder than when I was in my teens, but I was far more full of shame and guilt and way worse off than when I went in. And so I just basically tried to drink myself to death in those first couple months of getting out. And then I had family step in and be like, hey, we need to get you to Hawaii. We need to get you on a trip. And I started traveling down to Latin America, found myself at a yoga house where there was no drinking alcohol or and smoking allowed. And so it was like, okay, I stayed there for 6 months doing yoga 6 times a day and getting not just physical, but into spiritual stuff. And then I left there and, I'd accumulate a couple weeks of not drinking outside of a center somewhere, and then I'd drink again. And so that went on for a number of years. Still, I accumulated. There was one point I had 2 years of sobriety after getting out of the military. No AA, just a handshake with a friend. And then that stopped. And then I had a year. No. And then after that, when I came in a meeting, I, it was 2014, and I think I hadn't drank in, no, it wasn't 2014. I think it was 2017. I don't know when my first meeting was, but I hadn't drank in 2 or 3 years. I just been doing it on my own, white knuckling it, still very much depressed and suicidal because I was living by myself in on this property. It was supposed to start as like a family farm endeavor, and within a week, it all crumbled, and then it became just me living out there. And so I had time to myself, and time to myself during those times of my life. Now, whew, I cherish it, but we know what it's like when you're in the cups, if you will. And so, yeah, I came into AA. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that or what, when a buddy asked me to be a sponsor because I was the only one he knew who didn't drink. And I was like, I looked up on the internet, what does it mean to be a sponsor? And all arrows pointed towards the meetings. And so I went to this one in Anchor Point, Alaska, and it was above a liquor store, and there were maybe two people, three people. That's really what we'd always get at that time. But I remember going there just like, okay, I'm just gonna get this paperwork on being a sponsor, learn about it, and I don't remember what we read, what was said, but I was crying. And I came back to the next one, and I came back to the next one, and I realized, I knew right off the bat that I had no control over my alcohol, that I could not drink. I had to stop it. I was living in that never mode, and I still go there sometimes, but getting an AA and just being around people who don't use substances and who still have hard backgrounds and sometimes cuss and they're not holy. I just, it changed my life completely in my recovery. And when I met those people who were always telling me, the people in my meeting at that place were all 20 plus years sobriety, in their 60s. And they would tell me all the time, like, oh, just wait, you'll go to these meetings and these meetings. This is such a big thing. They would tell me how large AA was. And I really didn't believe it because we would go to other meetings on the peninsula, but they were kind of similar. It's like the most was probably 10 people. And I was at least 30 years younger than all of them. And then when I moved to Olympia, Washington to finish my degree at a college there, and I just dove right in to the AA community there. And, there were so many meetings in the area, so many funky people that were younger than me. Like, I had like 4 or 5 years at that point, and I was like, I didn't realize the accomplishment that I had by staying sober for that long. And so, yeah, I started blossoming out, going to the general service office in New York. And now anytime I travel, I find a good meeting and I try to share my experience, strength, and hope, and to listen and support others. So now today I do have that honor, that hope
Yeah.
that when I saw that recruiter I hoped for, and I'm not suicidal. I'm a present father, and I don't have to use substances, no substances, man. It's crazy. No tobacco, like no nothing. And it was gradual for me with quitting everything, but yeah, it's still not perfect,
No, it's life. It's
It
life.
is.
And we get to make choices today. And I didn't
Mhm.
realize that I had no choices when I was drinking. It was like, oh no, that's all I do is drink. Like,
Yeah.
there was nothing. Like, what else do you like to do? I don't know, nothing.
Hmm.
But now it's like the world is like a buffet table. We get to just go take all these different things and like try this, try that. So, where'd you meet? How did you
Yeah.
meet your wife along your path?
Yeah. And what you're saying can be so stressful sometimes, having all these options. I met my wife. She was working at home in Homer, Alaska, at a little bakery down there. And I went in there and I saw her, and it was literally the most beautiful woman I ever seen in my life. And she
Oh,
still is. I couldn't believe how beautiful this woman. I couldn't stop looking at her. Not in a weird way, but I talked to her, and in our brief conversation, she told me that she was sober and that she was a vegan. And at that time I was a vegetarian and I was sober. And it's pretty rare to meet Alaskans that were that age, especially, that are sober, and that whether they're vegetarian or not, and I'm not a vegetarian now, but are eating consciously. And and right then I was like, oh my God, I need to marry this woman. Oh my gosh. And I remember I went out on the town and I saw her there, and she was dancing with another guy. She showed up with a guy, she was dancing with him. I was like, okay, it's not meant to be. That's okay. And then I went home And I think for 3 years I thought about her. She disappeared. 3 or 4 years. She left town. She didn't work at that baker anymore. She's not from Alaska. She's from Kansas City. And, some things happened and she left. And I always had her in my heart, hoping like, gosh, that's part of my sobriety is I had a really bad relationship with someone who was a drinker. And, I'm not going to say she was an alcoholic, but we didn't live together. But whenever she'd come around, she was always, drinking and leaving bottles and blah blah blah. So after that one, like I cheated on her as a sober person. I'd never cheated on anyone, but it's like I couldn't get out of the relationship. No matter how hard I tried, I still didn't have the backbone and the willingness to set a boundary and say no. I was constantly trying to please others, still in my sobriety. And so after cheating on her, I felt kind of bad. I mean, I always judged people who did that. And I still do. I try not to, but I saw why, at least in my instance. And I didn't kiss or sleep with anybody for a number of years, maybe 3 years. I was just really into the program, really working on myself and my spiritual program, and hoping that one day my wife would come back around. And when I was back in at my property, and I remember I was talking to my sponsor and I was like, man, I miss girls, dude. I love this guy. I really miss women. I was always by myself or in the meetings, and it was just guys. And he said, you be careful what you wish for there, Bob. You be careful. And yeah, a few years later, here I am. I married her. She came back to town and I saw her and I asked my sponsor, dude, I said, she's at the bakery. What do I do? And he said, well, you know what I used to do? What? Ask a girl out? So I asked her out. She didn't know it was a date. And then I gave her space. She was still sober. She's got more sobriety time than I do. And by giving her that space, I think she started reaching out to me. And yeah, it wasn't very long after, we knew we were both in our mid 30s. It was like, okay, like we're not messing around. Let's do this thing. We got married. 9 months later, there's the first kid. Couple months later, 9 months later, there's the next one. And so we went into it pretty quickly, but I'm just so grateful that both of us are clean and sober and that we do have these tools that we've learned. So yeah, I just can't believe I tell my sponsor all the time, and we go to his house every week, my wife, my whole family, that's like our best friends. And his wife's always like, oh, where would you guys be if it wasn't for him telling you to ask her on the date? And I always give him credit because I don't know if I would have had that confidence still.
It's amazing because you mentioned something. Well, there's so many things. And when I'm here writing, I'm making myself notes so I go back to these certain things. But you said that when you went to down to Latin America and you did your yoga retreat for 6 months and you learned spirituality, did you have any sense of spirituality prior to that?
I did. Yeah, I was raised in a household that my mother was Catholic, but not a
Mhm.
practicing Catholic, and we never went to church, but mother really got into different Native American spiritual beliefs and techniques, and we were always going to these powwows and stuff. And so I did believe in a creator and this universal spirit and, birth and rebirth. I believed in those things, but I didn't really have any idea how to pray, meditate, connect with that. I just thought that it was out there, and when I died something would happen to what was inside of me. But yeah, I learned a lot more at that yoga retreat, and then I went to Nepal and India, and I started doing more like Buddhist practices and Buddhist retreats, and that helped me get even deeper into the meditations and the prayers.
That is so cool. That I am so envious because that's like on my list. I had kids when I was, you know what I mean? I had kids when I mean, I got sober when I was 37 and my oldest was 10, you know? So it wasn't like I was like, oh, here, I'm going over to find myself in India. Nobody would have taken that.
Yeah,
Did you love that?
I absolutely loved it. Yeah, that completely changed my life, and I still, to this day, it's been, I don't know, 10 years since going over there, but yeah, it's in my heart every day, in my practice, and just before getting on the phone here, I'm on my knees praying with my head on the ground, and those were, and they were all silent, and so I think part of what I got so much out of them was the ability to be quiet and not let my mind take over and send me down those spirals of shame and depression and all that. And so yeah, not to mention just the techniques of how to pray and things, but hopefully you make it over there one of these days.
I will, I hope. I pray. And guess what? Right before I came on here, I was at a yoga and meditation. I did my yoga from 11 to 1. I was there doing my thing too prior to coming on here. It's been one of the biggest gifts I've learned from being in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous was because when I first got there and they're like, prayer, I got that because I was raised Catholic, but I raised my children Episcopalian, but I always had a
Mm-hmm.
sense of God. But that meditation piece was because it's such a huge word, isn't it? And people think
Mm-hmm.
that, oh, I have to sit there like this and my hands. And if you're listening to this, I've got my hands and with my forefinger, my thumb, and I'm and you're not going to have any thoughts. And I took a course at Penn, at University of Pennsylvania, and they said you will always have thoughts. It's what you do with the thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you went on, you have
Yep.
these two little girls, you move. So you've owned this property. I want to go back to this property. So it sounds like you've
Yeah.
had this property, these 22 acres. So was your mom going to go and do this with you? Like make it,
No, I bought it in 2012. I still had some money from the military saved, and while I was in the military, I really wanted to go home and buy a little land to farm. It's something that, I mean, if I were to look at my ancestry from back in Ireland, Scotland, like we've all been farmers and warriors. Like that's what we do, and poets and writers. And so
oh,
it's like it was something inside of me that I just knew. I wasn't raised doing that, but either way, I bought the land with a brother. My brother, his girlfriend, and their son. We were all going to move out there together, and we were going to take over the payments. It was an unfinished house, 20 acres, for a good price. And very quickly, I guess it was an out for her. My brother and I moved over there, and she was like, well, I'm not going to move over there. Well, okay. Like, so she stayed in Seward with my brother's son, and my brother left where we were because it's 210 miles away to go back over there with his son and his girlfriend. And I think 3 months later, they were completely out financially. 6 months, I don't know the details, but they were out financially within the first year. And I was out there by myself without carpentry skills, very beginning gardening skills, but a serious, resilient spirit and a need for hard labor. And so, I just started working it. And as the years have gone on, I've worked more and more and learned more and more, and it's expanded our growing operation. And on the other coin is I'm a writer. And so I've always, ever since I can remember, been a writer. And my dream was to have a farm in the summer and then a place where I could hole away and write and do that in the winter. And so that is really what it's become. And I had the dream of it being a family farm, and it didn't go like it was planned. And I was pretty resentful for a bit about that, no doubt. And it almost completely divided our family. But thankfully, my brother and I were able to forgive one another over different things, and yeah, now, it's my wife and I's land. It's paid off. We paid it off about 3 or 4 years ago. It's
so
20
awesome.
acres. Yeah, and now we do have that family farm, we have people come out and help us out. We're constantly going back and forth with whether or not to sell. We want to dial in our operation before we start expending all the energy to sell. And so I think, some years we sell a little bit, others we sell more. I don't know if this year we're going to step up to try to sell more and do markets, which we have in the past, but thankfully my writing is making us some money, and we just started this like newsletter thing. These different people are like, "Oh, you should try this Patreon and all these things." We don't know nothing about it, and so someone had gave us a tip, and I've been listening to podcasts, and so we just started this like this our first month for this newsletter, and that's been really neat because it's like a way to write, a way to teach, a way to share, and a way to make a little bit of money spreading positivity as you're doing while being out there in the middle of nowhere. There's not a lot of jobs where we're at. And
So
so,
I I want to ask
yeah,
you
go for it,
something, not to interrupt, but so when you
please.
say that you don't know what you're going to keep and what you're going to get rid of, okay, so you've got to back up. So you have 20
Mhm.
acres, and what are you growing? What do you have?
Yeah.
Cattle? Do you have
Hmm.
chickens? Do you have flowers? What is
Yeah.
it that you have that you're taking to these farmers markets?
Hmm. Yeah. So we have 20 acres there, and probably about, I think we're growing and utilizing just about two and a half. The other is conservation, wetlands, forest. Um, and on that two and a half, we have a greenhouse. In Alaska, we do these high tunnels to extend the seasons, and that's 30-foot wide by 48-foot long. And inside of that greenhouse, we grow hot crops. We grow tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, squash. All of those fill that big greenhouse, and garlic. And then outside, we have chickens for laying hens. We've got a flock of about 40 laying hens. And then every year we get anywhere from 12 for us to, I think last year we did 48 meat birds for us and friends and family. And then we have two goats that are new. They're not milking yet, but we plan to start milking them soon. We have a couple ducks, and we have an orchard, a young apple orchard that is about 50 apple trees, about 49. Um, and then we just recently, about 4 years ago, put a yurt up. And so that's like an 18-foot yurt. We were doing Airbnb with that to earn some extra money. And then we've had family. My brother has stayed in it for multiple years before. And then we have workers who will stay in there. And then outside of there, in not in the greenhouse, but we grow variety of flowers that we put into little bunches, cut flowers. We grow vegetables from kale to cabbage, turnips, radish, beets, potatoes galore, enough to feed our family for the whole year and sell some if we wanted to. So just, mix sunflowers, mixed vegetables, strawberries. We have a lot of fruit, raspberries, strawberries. Um, what are the other ones? Service berries. And every year we kind of take some cuttings from the raspberries and then plant more over here and plant more over there. And we keep bees, so we do the bee thing. Um, yeah, we have a little assortment of things going on out there.
It's so amazing. It's what we call, down, do they call this the lower 48 or something? Isn't
Oh
that what
yeah,
yeah, the lower 48. It's like farm to table.
yeah.
Like that's all I can envision because everything you have, I'm sure they could classify as organic. I don't even know. I mean, I of
Mm.
course have fallen into I'm like, oh, I only can buy organic. Is it really organic? I don't know. And how does that work with the light? Because isn't it totally black like right now?
No, it's not totally black where we're at. We're south central, so we're hundreds of miles from up in the Arctic Circle. But yeah, we're not growing anything right now. There
So
may
what
be
is it like?
some people. Go ahead,
How
sorry.
what's the sun? What is this? Like what's the sun? When is the sun up in the
Yeah.
sky?
Um, if I remember correctly, I think we're getting light right now, probably around 9 to 10-ish, and I think it's going down around 5. But that now we're getting more daylight. So when it was, and it's really low, I mean, it's barely like we have solar panels and we're barely getting anything because the sun is so low. It's at like a 25-degree angle off the Earth's surface when you look at it.
Really?
Yeah. And so it just barely goes across, the Earth. Just, if you were to put your fingers up, it'd probably be 6 inches up off the Earth's surface. And it just slowly, fastly actually streaks across the sky that way. And that makes it very hard for us to grow in the winter, which is part of why. I mean, I'm not going to say we're constantly going back and forth, but we're like, oh, what if we lived in, say, any place south of where we live? And we'll think about what it's like growing in those places. But yeah, so it is difficult. And in the summer, it's the opposite. I mean, and it's tough for me. I'm a workaholic, so it'll be midnight and it's still light and I'm out there working. And then the sun barely goes down. It's still bright enough to work. And then it'll come up at 5, and so it's like, how do you sleep? And yeah, that can be challenging. But yeah, that's part of why the whole season extension, the high tunnels, people are putting those up so we can grow not just in the beginning of May, but late April, try to get stuff in the ground and then go past September 15th a little bit. It's tricky. It's tricky, but
It's so there's like so I guess you always are outweighing the good with the bad. And then do you homeschool your girls?
they're not old enough yet, but that is the plan. Yeah, one
Okay.
is 3.5 and the other's 1.5. So she'll be starting very soon.
Yeah, so you guys will do the homeschooling thing, which I think is
Yeah.
cool, especially in today's world. I don't know. It would be scary. I'm glad my kids are old. I have to tell you that I really am because it's just so scary in some of these states what's
Hmm.
going on. It's just crazy. And see, I live in Florida, so it's pretty much sunny all the time and like
Yeah.
80 degrees, which is kind of nice, a little bit different than yeah, but it's very populated. And for you
Hmm.
guys that are listening, that prior to us recording, Bob and I were talking about he's in Kansas City right now and they're playing in the playoffs this weekend. And he's like, there's so many cars and there's so many people. Oh my God, it's so stressful. Does it cause you stress?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And it's not just the fact that there's cars and people, that's fine. I've lived in cities. It's that, where I live, I spend a lot of time outside and I don't do that here. I mean, we go out and we try to go for a walk and, we're having to constantly move for all the cars that are coming. It's just like more and more cars. And we live in a nice neighborhood here, grandma does. And then, yeah, so there's not as much outside time because there's so many people. And I mean, I don't know. Because there's so many people, it's also there are dangerous people, I guess,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
understand that. I've looked at some sites online that show maps of people, and it's like, oh my gosh. But what's more stressful for me is that, we're living with grandma right now, which I love her. But my wife and I don't talk a lot with our kids the age that they are because they're
Mhm.
constantly, and so we'll talk at night when we get our time together. But right now, it's like grandma's talking and she's playing with the kids. And then we visit this auntie and she's talking. And then add 3 kids to the mix and then add grandpa. And it's all the visiting that happens and not being able to be balanced with me just going outside. And I know, not to keep rambling, but that's part of why I smoked all the time. I haven't smoked a cigarette in 5 years, but because I need breaks. I know. Isn't that so incredible?
Oh my God, I'm on 10 days right now. Because I just
Oh.
went through another stressful time, and I was telling somebody if it didn't kill you, that would be the one. I mean, like drinking, it was hard to quit drinking, but the cigarettes is way hard for me. It's been way harder. Yeah.
Mhm. It is
Hmm.
so hard.
And what you just described, it's like getting that time out because you can't smoke. Nobody smokes. I mean, like, I don't know anybody who smokes in their house, but I like, you get
Mhm.
up, the ritual, get up,
Yeah.
go outside, have that time by yourself, get to really breathe, and then come
Mhm.
back in. But I'm not doing it 10 days in. I'm like, I cannot go
Good for
back. I
you.
cannot go back.
Yeah.
But it's so how long are you there for?
I'm here for about a month, if not more or less. We have a little farm sitter who's staying at our place, and she said if we want to stay longer, we can. but we bought a one way, so we're prepared in case it falls through and she needs to move on.
Yeah.
We're
That's
trying to
kind of,
buy a house, man. It's crazy.
oh my gosh, it's crazy. It is
It
crazy.
is.
But
Yeah.
so will you tell us about your book, and you
Oh yeah.
self-published your book? I would love to hear
Yeah.
about that. And so all the
Yeah.
listeners can hear and go find it. And we'll even have the link. I have the link. So you guys, when you want to, if you're interested, you can go and find it in the
Yeah.
description. But go ahead, tell us about your book. There it
My
is.
book. Yeah, she's got it. My wife's mom. Their whole family read it. It's so sweet. So my book, Warflower, it I wrote it when I finished that yoga retreat. When after I was living at that place, I ended up finding a house sitting opportunity in Costa Rica. I stayed there for 3 months and I was by myself. And I just filled a journal with longhand cursive. That's how I always write. And, about a couple years later, when I went back to type up that journal, I could barely read it. And what I could read, it was so angry. And so, a few years went by. I was writing this and writing that. I was writing as a newspaper writer. And I always had that story. Like, I know I've got a bigger story, but I just need to either type it or rewrite it. And so when I went to India and I got done with I think it was a 17-day retreat, I started a 1 hour email to myself. Every day I'd get on the internet and I'd write this email. And after, about 4 months, I'm a very fast typer. It's something I don't know why. My mom made me learn how to type as a young kid, but so I would type for that hour. No thinking, no outline, just grrr. And when I ended up going back home to Alaska and I went on my email and I copy and pasted it, I had well over 100,000 words. It's like 120 or something. I was like, whoa. I was a newspaper writer. I know articles are 500 words, a book like 50 to 80, 100 plus for nonfiction. I knew a couple things about it, but I knew I wasn't done. So I just kept typing and typing and typing. And it ended up growing into something that was like 250,000 words. It's this beast. And
Wow.
and then I went through the process of trying to cut things out and make it into a solid story. And so I learned a lot of hard lessons, if you will. I would say waste of time lessons, but it is what it is. You learn. And so, yeah, as the years went on, I thought I polished it up into this epic story. And I started sending it out. Agents, publishers, I think I had one or two people read it. And I just got rejected after rejected. Dozens and dozens were piling up on me. And then I ended up meeting a mentor who told me you need to go back to college to make connections, get a better education, and get this story out there. And I think you can do that if you go to college. I took his advice, returned to college. I'm grateful I got my bachelor's degree. And I did make a connection with a professor who read my book, two of them. And this guy, he helped me polish it down even further. And after that, the whole time I was still sending it out, sending it out. By this point, I had well over 100 rejections, probably closer to two, if not more. And I had written two other long stories that were over, 150 pages because I would have to take breaks from this book. And finally I was like, okay, I'm not going to get it submitted. I'm not going to get published by any agency. It's hard for me to give up, but I need to take another route because self-publishing is not what I'm doing. Like, that is failure. I'm going to be a Penguin Classic author, okay? So I ended up deciding I was going to try to go to a master's program and make connections through a master's of fine arts program. All the people who gave me references, they had read my book, they were guaranteeing me without those words, you're getting in. There's no way. My wife and I were ready to leave the property, have the second baby in Idaho. We were seeing all these signs from God, like, oh, it's going to happen. And I got rejected. And so it's like, oh my God. I went to my sponsor. I called my sponsor. I'm always asking my sponsor for advice. And I was on my knees in my driveway, almost in tears, but not in tears. And he listened to me and he said, Bob, you got this epic story. on your computer. I've read it. Just self-publish the damn thing. You need to provide for your family and you need to get it out there. And right then I'd heard it multiple times before, but at that moment, it was kind of like hitting rock bottom. I thought, you know what? I'm going to look into this. And I started looking into it and seeing all the pros of keeping my story the way that it is and learning my own marketing and promoting and this and that and the other. And so, make a long story short, in June of 2022, I published the book. And the amount of support that I've received from people in my own state, people outside, veterans, non veterans, alcoholics, non alcoholics, has been so incredible to me because my book, it's a memoir and it documents, me going to war, and it'll be, 2 or 3 chapters of me at war, followed by a couple chapters of growing up in Alaska, different family things, and then back to war, back to Alaska, back to war. And then it ends halfway. The first part ends, and it starts the day I get out of the military. And so then it's 2 weeks, no past, no future, of the struggles of a young man just home from war, trying to get back to his home in Alaska. And so, people tell me it's like, oh, I connect with the single mother. I connect with the brothers. I connect with the war. I connect with alcoholism. I connect with sexual abuse. Like, there are so many things that, I mean, I didn't know there was so much like trauma people have told me in the book, but it has been like writing that, I believe, is what has provided me the opportunity to be married, to be a present father, to have healed so much of the stuff that I went through. And yeah, the book's out there. I'm not going to say almost done, but the second one, I'm getting the title or the cover made right now. And I'm really, really excited about it.
Oh my gosh. For one, you have to send me your book or I have to
I
get
will.
it because I need to read it. I wish I'd read it before this, but the next one you will send me and then we'll do when your next one comes out. Because, I do want to talk about the veterans thing because, I'm well aware of, you know, what resources are not available now for veterans. I know that our previous president Donald Trump, hopefully our president again, will he had actually done more for veterans than anybody else had done in all pretty much all time because it's such the for it shouldn't be, they should be the one we're revering. It's like it's teachers, it's our civil servants, it's our firefighter, all of that, people that go and fight for us. Those are the people that we should be rising up, not the people who run like huge Fortune 500 companies, which are great too. But I mean, you guys, if we didn't have you, we wouldn't even have the land we have today.
Mm-hmm.
And how many veterans out there don't ever get sober or get the resources or the time or the gifts that you've had, which are so amazing. I mean, just hearing
Mm-hmm.
your story, I mean, I just see God through all of it. It's just like, I'm like, oh, there's another God wink. Oh my gosh, there's another God wink. And there's another God wink. I mean, God was there for you the entire time, even
Mm-hmm.
from when your wife, what's your wife's first name? Because I want,
Yeah, her name is Savanna.
all right, what a great name. I love Savannah,
Mm-hmm.
Georgia, by the way. It's such a pretty town. Um, But to think like Savannah coming back into your life, the fact that Idaho
Mm-hmm.
wasn't meant to be. I mean, it was meant to be that but every time God put it in front of you, like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, because my ego, right? It's like our egos are like, no, I'm gonna be Penguin. I'm gonna be one of these major like houses from New York City. And it was like, no, you get to all creativity is at your fingertips. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that we're kind of in a time of things becoming like that. Like we don't need the corporate people that we think because they've got all these letters after their name that they're better than us because they're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. And I didn't know, just like when I first got sober, I didn't know anyone who was sober. And very quickly entering that realm, I found there are thousands and thousands, probably millions of people that are sober. And it's the same with self publishing. I had only heard and I read the magazines that are just preaching, go to this MFA or that MFA and get published through this and go to this. And it's all money. They're
Yeah,
just wanting my money,
exactly. Exactly.
And when I started looking into the self-publishing and finding out, oh, I'm not the one breaking ground. There are thousands of authors that are self-publishing every day,
Mhm.
and people who've been doing this for 15 years that know how to make a living doing it. And so there's so much to learn from them. And I don't know the statistics because you know how statistics are. Do you trust them? Do you not? There's so many numbers thrown around regarding the number of veterans who commit suicide every day or don't get help or they're drinking themselves to death. I mean, come on, just go to any VFW, go to any Legion, go to any bar, and you're going to find them. You know, they're
Yeah.
probably holed up in the corner, not wanting to talk to anybody, pissed off. I've been there, you know, and I really do wish there were more opportunities for them and more people who were veterans or are veterans who were coming out and being able to open up and say, yeah, man, like I'm a combat vet. Like I did this, I did this, I did this. I know. I mean, not trying to be vulgar, but you fuck around, man. I'll shoot your ass. I mean, let's not go there. You know, I've done that, but I don't need to have that identity anymore of like, look at me, like, I'm a combat guy, and then drinking because you're afraid to let those other sides come out. So I just hope, man, if there is a vet out there, that they really find the help that they need because they've done so much for this country. And every day, I don't have that shame I did before. Now I am proud of what I did. I'm so honored to have served this country, whether it was for good or bad. I don't know those details of what it was all about, but I do agree with you that this country, we wouldn't have this incredible country and the freedoms we have if it weren't for the vets.
Oh, it's 100%. And I think it's so ironic that someone that is there on the firing lines and done what you have done, God graced you with 2 daughters. Where
Yeah.
And, girls are different. They're softer. They like kindness. They don't like screaming. They don't like they're just a little
Hmm.
more it's just a little
Yeah.
more sweet, right? They're just a little more
Yeah.
sweet. And your isolation, you've mentioned it a bunch of times that you like to be by yourself. And do you
Hmm.
look at that as being like bad or good, or it just is part of where you find your solace? And when you spoke about balance, which to me is like so important, is having that
Hmm.
balance.
Yeah, I can definitely see parts of myself that go into negative states of isolation as opposed to solitude. And today, and it has been like this for so long, I've been that person who's always on the outside of the crew. You know, I'm more into one-on-one conversations, more into go in the woods than go to the movie theater, you know. And so yeah, and I also find a lot of my spiritual practice is not necessarily in a big congregation with all these other folks. I get it from silence and from myself connecting with my God. And so, yeah, I do know that there are times when I shouldn't be alone because all I'm doing is spiraling and not connecting. And you know, that's when I do need to either go to a meeting or call my sponsor or tell my wife what's going on. And my wife, I love her, man, Savanna. I never realized what the military in my past did to me. You know, I am who I am. I try to be a nice guy. I'm a nice guy, but my wife, you know, she tells me I'm a hard ass. And so having two daughters every day, I have to like, don't be a hard ass to the kids, Robert. You know, it's okay for me to be a hard ass to myself, to others, but gosh, they're kids. You know, they need to just be having fun and getting dirty and all these things. And so, yeah, I think God has given me that little wink of like trying to soften you up, Bobby.
Oh my gosh. And I want to end with this. What would you tell somebody that's listening? Like, what are the tools you use when you are feeling that spiraling? Because I don't even think it matters. I mean, now you have 9 years of continuous sobriety, and congratulations on that. It's amazing, amazing. It's like the best, but here I'm almost, I'm in my 18th year, I'll have 18 years in August, and it's God willing. And I still go down sometimes that negativity. You wake up and you're like, oh my gosh. So, what are the tools that you always reach for in your personal toolbox?
Yeah, the first ones, and they just sound so common and so easy, but it really is. I'm a to-do list guy. And so every day, my number one is don't drink. Some people say number one's pray, God, what to each their own. But for me, don't drink, no matter what. And number two is pray. And so those are my top two. Every day, I got to start my day thinking like that and doing that throughout the day. Even when, like now, I'm looking for real estate and I'm talking to all these people and boom, boom, I'm getting stressed. I have to remember to pray.
Yeah.
Don't drink and pray. And so when I start getting like you're talking, spiraling down, then I I have to go on walks. I'm big on walks. I go for a walk, I get outside, I get trapped. You know, when I start feeling like that, it's a lot of it is when I start feeling trapped, whether it's in a house, by people. And so when I get outside, I feel like I'm given like freedom to breathe and the pressure's lifted from me. And so that's my number two, three. I don't know. It's right up there. I got to get outside. I got to go for a walk, move my back body, some bilateral movement, practice deep breathing. And then when I get done with those things, and if they didn't help me, I call my sponsor, man. I really do. That dude, I mean, I swear to God, I tell people it's like he stormed the beaches of Normandy. This guy is like as hard as you get. It's like, but I've cried to him, you know, I've wailed to him. He's hugged me. I've never seen him cry, but he's almost cried, you know, and I've never felt so welcome by someone and not judged by someone. And he's not afraid to tell me when I'm doing something wrong. Like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. He was telling me before coming here, you need to fire that real estate agent. I was like, no, dude, it's fine. I fired her. When I called him and told him, I was like, I hate to tell you this, man, but
You were
I
right.
fired her. Yeah. He was like, so yeah. And then I'm so thankful, you know, my wife is sober. And so I talk to people, I write, you know, that's another thing for me. It's just like getting outside, writing. My wife knows it too. Like I wrote my book out of desperation and I still feel that sometimes. There's so many things I never processed and I'm trying to as I get more sober and work the steps, but I still like, I got stuff stored in me somewhere. And so I get it out with my words, working out, whatever it is that's physical and spiritual and mental. So just find a routine, man. That's what I got to say to anybody. Find a routine, find your own little tools. Maybe use some of what Elizabeth has said or some of what I said or whatever it is, but not to give up too. I think that's like the
Don't
biggest one.
ever, oh, don't
Yeah.
ever give up.
No.
And I have to tell you that you know, this house is gonna come when it's supposed to. You already know
Mm-hmm.
that as much as I do. And you know, because it's like, look at everything shows up when God wants it to. It's like I
Yeah.
sit here and I've been doing this podcast for 7 years, you know, and it's like writing the book. You keep doing it like it has, you know, it's gonna when it's supposed to, it will supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And when it but along the journey, it's like having a smile on our face and not and knowing for one we have a sponsor to call. Like I had an hour-long conversation with mine this morning. Like it's just,
Yeah.
you know, having that resource and using it,
Mm-hmm.
having these tools, using them, walking through this. And I do think that when we got getting sober pre-COVID was a
Mm-hmm.
little different than it is, I think, today. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, today there's a lot more Zoom meetings, a lot more people not holding hands in the meetings, a lot less getting together with people is what I've found, and probably a lot more isolation.
And
What
I
have
don't
you
think that
seen? Because you've been in big areas.
I've
I'm
been
sure
big
you've seen
areas
a
and
lot.
it's for me, it's been it's kind of sad. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to be like, and I remember when I came in and I was like the old timers, like I remember this big old timer saying to me one day, I was like, I raised my hand. I'm like, I only have 6 months of sobriety. And whatever, I spieled afterwards. And he's like, I need to talk to you after this. And I'm like, and he took me took me aside and he said, "Don't ever say you only have this amount of time, because most people don't even get one day." And that
Mhm.
I will never forget, but it was like those sort of things. Like it was hardcore. It wasn't snowflakes. It was like, this is what you're going to do. And I don't
Right.
really care what you think. I don't care what you say. Just keep showing
Mhm.
up at meetings and, you just keep doing this one day at a time and we're going to work on these steps. And there's no question. You do them in order. You don't just go from 1 to 4. And everybody would be like, step 4 is so scary. And I'd always be like,
Mhm.
well, that's my life. And it's the only one I have. And I've got to clean it up.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good
And Zoom
reminder for
isn't
me.
fun,
Yeah, I mean, I would rather be meeting you in person right now, no doubt about it.
for
For
sure.
me with COVID, I was so lucky because where we were, I mean, I was in my little home in Alaska, and my meeting, I think we had 2 people, 5 people, and so I haven't seen the changes that I've heard from people who moved to where I live from Philadelphia, from Pittsburgh, from California, these places and the things they were telling me about what was happening during COVID. I was like, I mean, I saw glimpses on the TV, but I'm not a big news guy either. So it was like, I imagine it has significantly impacted AA, recovery, um, people's everyday lives, the way we think. And so, yeah, I'm more of the tough old guy crew that's like, "Ugh, do it like this. I like being told what to do, and I like when I see newcomers get that type of treatment rather than like, oh, hey, come here, buddy. Are you okay? I don't
Oh,
know.
it's tough. It's tough because we do have a disease that wants us dead all the time, and it's crazy. So being diligent and thinking that you can just treat it with kid gloves is kind of a joke. Bob,
Mhm.
it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. It has been awesome, and I'm serious. You've got to let me know when the next book is published. And when I come
I
to
will.
Alaska, I'm calling you. I want to see this beautiful farm. It sounds amazing.
Please do. Yeah,
So
please do.
everybody go to my website and you can see the whole description of what everything that Bob does. You can get his links, you can reach out to his newsletter, you can do all that there. You can also go sign up for my newsletter that comes out every Friday. Every Friday. And for one, to know that you are not alone. If you're here and you're listening, you are not alone. Please reach out to one of us. I promise we will write you back. I always write
Mhm.
people back right away, which I'm sure Bob does too. And until next time, everybody, keep getting busy, living sober. Bye, everybody.